Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. First off, I will start with a little bit of housekeeping. As part of this webinar, you'll be able to ask questions during it, and we'll get to all those questions towards the end of it. So I do encourage you that if you have any questions during this webinar, to answer them, and obviously we'll try and answer as many of these as possible during this webinar, any of which we maybe can't answer or we need to get further information on, we'll then get in contact with you and we'll answer offline after the webinar. As part of this webinar, also, you'll be receiving a copy of all the slides that you see. So you'll be able to go back to these and use these for your reference after the presentation. So I hope that's useful for everyone. And what we'll do is we'll delve into what we're going to be talking about today. So today we're going to be talking about Autonomous Cloud Essentials. And a lot of you are probably wondering what Autonomous Cloud Essentials is, what it is, how do you get it, what does it do, those kind of things. And hopefully today we'll be answering those questions for you. So to give you a very quick rundown, Autonomous Cloud Essentials is something that Ultima has developed internally within our Ultima Labs division, and it is part of the Autonomous Cloud portfolio, which is now a suite of products that are used for managing Azure-based environments. So Autonomous Cloud Essentials, at very high level, is an IaaS-focused platform, so it's very much focused around that IaaS VM-based estate. It comes included with your CSP agreement with Ultima, which we'll delve into later on, and it's designed to be a fully automated platform to help alleviate some of the day-to-day pain points of managing an Azure public cloud environment. So hopefully that's what you're expecting. As part of Autonomous Cloud and the wider Ultima kind of product offerings, Autonomous Cloud Essentials falls into the CSP bracket. Obviously, I've mentioned CSP prior to this, and it comes as part of the Essentials Basic and Essentials Plus packages that we're now offering as Ultima. If you wish to find more information about those, I would encourage you to go and contact either your account manager or your Microsoft account manager at Ultima and go through them to find out all the other benefits that are available as part of it. Today, I won't be talking about those specific pieces, so we'll just be talking around the Autonomous Cloud Essentials element that comes as part of it. So to kind of start off, what we're trying to do here is set the scene, is why have we had to kind of get to this world? Why are these kind of things needed? And what we're looking at, first of all, is this kind of new management paradigm that we're moving towards. So if we look historically, especially if we're going back kind of the pre-cloud era, when we were managing systems, they weren't systems that were designed to scale. They were pretty well defined in terms of where they are, what they're running on, what all the operating systems are, etc. Pretty well defined in that world. So weren't really cloud ready. Quite a lot of the management, although there may be a specific script you could run for a specific task, they weren't automated big workflows. We were talking about maybe individual point pieces of automation, or they were manual effort to do a lot of the work. And they weren't necessarily there to drive efficiencies within the environment, and especially not when we're talking about a cloud environment. When we're being billed by the second, by the minute, by the hour, by the day, being able to use your environment efficiently is quite important. When you've got a capital investment that you've made, like you may do historically with an on-premise infrastructure, being able to kind of depreciate that over time is kind of fairly normal, and then being able to use those resources as much or as little as you want. Just depends how much you get out of it, rather than now where we're looking at this operational expenditure where you'll build for what you've allocated. That one of the kind of misconceptions with a cloud environment is you pay for what you use, and actually if you look at it, the bill that you get at the end of the day is not necessarily what you use, it's what you allocate. So whether it's a massive VM that you've got with 16 CPU cores and 128 gig of RAM, you're going to pay for that whether you use 1 core or 16 cores. So it's how can we make that more efficient as part of this? The problem we have is a lot of the solutions we have out today in the wider kind of world are unsustainable. This isn't to say there aren't solutions out there, because there are certainly solutions that are cloud ready and are more capable of doing some of these pieces. However, if you look at a traditional way of approaching this, and this is what we found from a lot of the customers that we've been dealing with as part of this, is they will have a very traditional kind of mechanism to manage public cloud services. So they will be using agents typically. That will quite often be hooking back into often an on-premise ITSM system, which then requires a VPN connection between the two. And that VPN connection always has to be on. It doesn't use anything that's particularly cloud native, particularly kind of cloud ready and very much is relying on opening up these big tunnels to be able to move the data in between. It's not using anything smart like HTTPS connections or anything like that. So what we're trying to do is trying to kind of modernize that a little bit now. And this all kind of stems from what we call the cloud promise. If we go back about a decade, which may seem like a very long time in the world of IT, but about a decade ago was where the kind of real prevalence of kind of the public cloud started. That's when you start looking at AWS and Azure starting up, kind of becoming the kind of big entities they are today. And a lot of it started with whether it's mismarketing or a bit of misinformation that came out of the public cloud will solve all of your issues. So it'll do all this documentation, patching, and all that kind of stuff for you. And actually, if we look at what we've got today, is we look at this reality that we've got. And this isn't to slight any of the public cloud providers. They do a very good job at what they do. It's just kind of painting the picture of what this kind of reality that we live in now is. Actually, the reality is there's a lot of the IaaS stack that actually needs to be managed by a customer. So the management, monitoring, documenting it, patching and maintenance, all of that needs to be covered by a customer. And you guys, I'm sure this is very much the reality you live in, and it's very much, in quite a lot of senses, a manual thing to do in the public cloud. Yes, there are tools out there that can do it and can help you with some of these pieces. They're generally not very well stitched together in a lot of cases, and generally to integrate them together can be a little bit of a pain, as we've seen through this process. So if we kind of break this down into 4 big areas, we have the cost problem. I mean, especially in the current situation that we're in, cost management and cost efficiency is something that pretty much every business in the UK is looking to try and achieve. How can they go and make sure that trying to make sure that what they're trying to do is what they're spending is aligned with how much that they're actually using from the environment. So they're not overspending anything. They're able to manage that effectively over the period of time. But then we look at monitoring. So being able to monitor what is out in the environment, be able to alert on it accurately, be able to make sure that all the services are covered. So we're not just looking at a machine, we're looking at any of the disks or any of the networks that are associated with it as well. Be able to have the skills. So this is not only the skills to be able to manage the environment itself. I'm sure most of you are more than capable of managing the environment, but also the kind of softer skills around how you do some of the compliance checking, how you do all the documentation for it, those kind of things that take a lot of time. And then finally, kind of following on from that is the reporting. How do we do reporting on the environment? How do we make sure that we're actually getting a full holistic view of the environment? We're not missing anything. And actually that's always kept up to date for you. Therefore, to address these challenges, we've created Autonomous Cloud Essentials. So this is the 3rd part of the Autonomous Cloud portfolio that I mentioned earlier on. We'll get into what the other parts are, but this part is very much focused on that kind of infrastructure as a service kind of area that I touched on. So Autonomous Cloud Essentials is something that we've developed in-house. So this is our first-party IP. This isn't another tool that we've taken from somewhere else and we've kind of just white labeled it or anything like that. It's something that we have full control over the development of, and we have in-house developers doing this. It's designed with cloud-native technology, so it's leveraging Azure services at the back end fundamentally, and then being able to surface those, automate those, build upon those in order to be able to give you this kind of big user experience that we're looking for. It also takes our knowledge that we've got. So over the roughly 10 years that we've been working with the Microsoft Cloud Services, we obviously have built up a lot of best practices, a lot of knowledge in terms of what some of these recommendations are, and all of that is built in for you to be able to leverage as part of this. So that kind of leads us to a solution that's very much built for the cloud. It's built to be automated, to take away a lot of the manual tasks that you have to do on a day-to-day basis, and also lower the cost. So how can we optimize the environment by using our best practices to make sure that you're using what you need to use when you need to use it? So to kind of delve into those pieces a little bit more, that cost piece. So when we put in Autonomous Cloud Essentials, depending on obviously exactly what your environment looks like, and this will vary from customer to customer, but we can see savings of up to 10% just from implementing Autonomous Cloud Essentials. I will get into a couple of examples of this later on, of some of the benefits that you get in terms of how we do the cost management, what we look for as part of it, and how we report that back to you. We also try and help reduce the amount of time needed to manage the underlying infrastructure. So if we can remove support effort from having to look at the underlying infrastructure, monitor it all the time, be looking at dashboards and stats all the time, and actually allow you to free that time up to be able to do something more useful to the business, like might be deploying a new application, it might be upgrading that 2008 server that you haven't yet got around to upgrading yet, whatever it may be, something that actually is going to be helping the business go forward. Maybe it's compliance aspect, like that 2008 example, it might be new functionality, whatever it may be, that's generally very helpful to businesses. The focus is also kind of tied into that. It's that kind of time and focus of being able to focus on doing stuff that is moving the business forward rather than just keeping it in its steady state. So they're the three kind of areas we look at, and we deliver this in 4 different areas. So we deliver it via alerting, we deliver it via dashboarding, we deliver it via dependency mapping, and we deliver it via documentation. So jumping into that alerting piece, what we've got here is we've got 5 different metrics, and these are the key metrics that we use. So the first 3 are very technically focused. So you've got your CPU, memory, disk. So if you're an administrator, they're the kind of things that you want to see alerts on. As soon as anything goes wrong, you can dive straight in. It tells you exactly what it is and exactly what's going wrong. One of the things we've done here that is a bit hidden under the covers, if I'm very honest about it, but actually is very clever, is the Azure native alerting. It's quite often very scripting heavy. So it quite often involves a lot of JSON. The errors that come out are not necessarily neatly written, if that makes sense. But what we try and do as part of this is we will take that and we effectively help turn that into a useful error to you. It gives you a lot more information. It puts it into plain written English. And as part of this, this is then put into an email and then emailed to the specific address that is the alerting address that we'll go into as we look into the setup of this. The last 2 were kind of more holistic environment-based alerts. So we look at the VM state, we look at any issues with the health of it, and we also look at the VM deletion. So this is where we're starting to get into more of the compliance stuff, tracking who's doing what. So that means you can, if anything does happen within the environment, you can keep track of it, you have an auditable record of it, and we're helping you kind of build out that wider view. So depending on which kind of side of the fence you sit on, more of the kind of wider management side or this kind of specific administration side, there's going to be something in there for you and something that you'll probably find quite useful. So the next step we do is dashboarding. So being able to have the visibility is quite important. So here are the 2 dashboards that you get as part of the Essential service. So on the bottom right, you have what we call the analytics overview. So this is a 30-day view across the environment. This allows you to look into trending analysis, gives you a good view on what VMs are sat in the environment, what resources you've got there, and kind of gives you that kind of big, wide, holistic environment view. When we go into the top left, which is the infrastructure and monitoring dashboard, what we're looking at there is a much more granular view. So we're down to 24 hours at this point. We get into the specific amount of memory use, CPU utilization, and when we click into any of those graphs, we get to further drill down into what percentiles do we want to look at it. Do we want the 50th percentile, the 90th, the 95th, 99th max? And then you can drill into that information quite granularly. So that allows you to kind of get a proper view of what's happening within that environment and allows you to drill down very much machine by machine. If you so wish, it might be you have some reports from users of some strange behavior on a particular server and you need to kind of go and drill into that. That'd be the kind of dashboard that you want to look at. Then we also do dependency mapping. So we do this in 2 slightly different ways. So one is within the Azure portal. So what you see on the right-hand side there is the mapping that we do in the Azure portal. So we take the server, we will map what it's connecting out to, over what ports it's connecting out to, and what servers it's connecting out to. That's all available across the environment. And all of this is automatically onboarded. So when you do the initial setup, it onboards those machines. If you go and set up new machines as part of this, it will automatically onboard those as part of the schedule as well. So there is no manual intervention for you to do any of this. All of this is all set up. All the onboarding into the dashboards also automated. So all of that is taken care of for you. So you don't have to go and do any human intervention to do any of this stuff. The other step that we also do is we then do some dependency mapping within the documentation. So that is trying to relate what machines are sat with what disks, what VNets, etc. So we're trying to give you all of that information nicely graphically viewed for that. So touching on that documentation piece, the reporting that we've got is pretty comprehensive. So here we're just talking about obviously the IaaS virtual machines. We're not talking about PaaS services, and we'll get onto what we can do for those in a little bit. But these kind of services that we're looking at here, so the IaaS services, it will detail the configuration of them, the dependency map I was talking about as part of it, give you a nice executive summary of kind of what's happening in the environment at a high level, what resources are being consumed, and that kind of stuff. So it gives you a good view across the environment, documented, ready to go for you to be able to consume. So these can be self-served as part of the portal. So we'll get into what that is in a second when we look into what's on the portal looks like. But it's very much built for you to be able to consume as you need when you need it. And the good news is it comes included with CSP tenants from Ultima. So you do not have to do anything. You don't have to pay any additional if you wish to go and leverage these things. Obviously, if you have a CSP tenant with us and you don't wish to leverage this, we're not going to force this upon you. It's very much you can choose to do it. However, we think there is a lot of value for a lot of customers doing this. So it might be that you are a complete PaaS house and you may not necessarily see huge amounts of benefit in this, so you may not necessarily turn it on. But for a lot of our clients, we see a reasonable amount of IaaS machines and IaaS services that sit out there. So being able to consume something like this is quite helpful to them. So the next question is, what do we do? How do we get started with this? And that's quite an important question, because the last thing we wanted to do is put a big barrier of there's a huge massive engagement that you need to go and do, and you need to go through a million checks in order to be able to get onboarded into this thing. And actually, we wanted to make this as simple as we can. And this is where a lot of the development effort that we've had over the last few months has gone into, is how can we make this as easy, simple, and automated for customers as possible. So when you sign up to the service, and obviously you accept all the terms and conditions, all that kind of fun stuff, you'll get through to this dashboard. So this dashboard is effectively, you can either get into your dashboard, you can either install Autonomous Cloud on another subscription, or you can look into your licensing. For the Essentials version, obviously the licensing isn't the important piece. There is, and I'll get into in a second, some reasons why that licensing bit there is there. But what you do is you'll go into the installation form, so you click that kind of install Autonomous Cloud. You go into put your company name in, the tenant ID, subscription ID, etc., as you'd kind of expect. Then you select the region that everything's in. Then you'll get all the virtual machines. You can exclude stuff from it. So if you don't want specific machines included as part of the service, for whatever reason, it might be you've got specific monitoring for that, or it might be a third party is looking after a specific machine for you, whatever it may be. There might be reasons why you want to exclude that. And then you put in an email address for notifications. Basically, you then hit submit. It then provides you with an executable file. That executable file basically is what we use to install everything that we need to and connect everything we need to out to the Autonomous Cloud service. So basically, all you need to do is you need to put that onto a machine that obviously has some internet-facing capability, run that, and then it will effectively install Autonomous Cloud for you. So it's a pretty low-touch effort for the installing of it. We did look into trying to do this fully automated, but there is the step of, because of how many different ways you can configure Windows and set everything up, having the executable file we found was the simplest way in order to be able to achieve what we were trying to achieve. And we're trying to do it as easily as possible while still being able to cover as many different scenarios as possible. So that gave us kind of the best balance between the two. So we tried to make it even simpler than this, but this is about as far as we could get with kind of any reasonable degree of bounds. So then when you go in and you've got it all installed, you'll come to this dashboard. So it'll give you your licensing information. So obviously here you can see this is on the free tier, the Essentials tier. It gives you an idea of what features you've got, what features are also available in other versions if you do wish to kind of look into those things. And if you were looking at kind of one of the paid for versions, you'd end up obviously with the license resources, etc., and your compliancy status, which you don't have to worry as part of this. What you also get as part of these dashboards is screens like this. So this is the cost saving and optimization. I put this in because I thought this was going to be one of the things that you guys probably wanted to see most as part of this. Is you probably want to see where those cost savings can happen, what we can do as part of them. So here are some of the kind of examples that you can see as part of what you get as essential. So we're looking at orphan public IP addresses, orphan disks, deallocated machines, and VMs that have been run for kind of a long period of time without a huge amount of usage on them. So orphaned IP addresses, orphaned disks, so these are basically IP addresses and disks that aren't attached to anything, but they are obviously allocated within your environment. This kind of goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning is when you've got it in an on-prem scenario, it's a capital expenditure and you just kind of depreciate it over time. When you're in a public cloud scenario, you're being paid for every minute that you have those services allocated to you. You may not be using them, but you're paying for them. So what we're trying to do as part of this is go, you can look into here. There may be a good reason why you've got them, and that's fair enough. It allows you to make the decision. We're not automatically removing anything as part of this. So it may be an IP address that you want to keep because it's got a DNS record that's pointed there and you want to use it pretty shortly and you don't want to change all your DNS settings, whatever it may be. Orphan disks, equally, sometimes customers keep orphan disks because they hold data for machines that they're no longer running, but they want to keep those disks as part of it. There are other ways you can do that, but that's one of the valid reasons for keeping an orphan disk. Same thing for deallocated VMs. Typically, this is something that actually most customers will go and actually follow the advice for, because basically what we're looking at here is machines that are stopped, but they're not deallocated. So you've still got the allocation going, so you're still being charged some money for that, but you're not actually running anything. So at that point, there's no point you can deallocate it. The downside to that is it does take longer to boot because basically the machine has to be allocated again. So that's a bit of a downside. So you may wish to look at on that side, is it a machine that you can willing to wait a few more minutes for it to be able to boot? If not, then it may be something you wish to just leave stopped and not deallocated. But it gives you kind of an idea on that side of what you can kind of achieve from that. And as I said, even those 4 things there, depending on obviously what your environment looks like, we can look at an up to 10% saving on that. So it can be quite a significant saving, especially if you've got a fairly sizable Azure environment. And generally, strangely enough, this happens more in larger environments because we get into what we like to term as cloud sprawl. I'm in the on-prem world, this is called VM sprawl. It's a similar kind of concept of machines get spun up, they get used for testing. There may be for a new application that's coming out. That application then gets put into production. The machines that were used for testing just kind of get left there and are just effectively costing you money. So what we're trying to do here is look at how we can go and reduce that sprawl, save you money from reducing that sprawl, and also make it more manageable in the long run. As you can see, when we get into kind of some of the premium features, there's app service plans, associated snapshots, and etc. that we can look at as part of this, and there's a myriad of other things that come in as part of it. And previously I was talking about what this kind of wider portfolio is. So as you can see, Autonomous Cloud Essentials makes up a part of what this kind of portfolio is. So this Autonomous Cloud Essentials is quite often the entry point and will be the entry point for a lot of customers into the whole Autonomous Cloud portfolio. So it comes as part of the tenant with Ultima, so part of the CSP tenant is very much an IaaS focused platform. So we're talking virtual machines, VNets, disks, etc. From that side. If we want to go up into the PaaS piece, and this is where I kind of was briefly touching on before, we can look into if you want to keep managing it yourself because you have a very competent Azure team, but you want to just kind of take away some of the kind of day-to-day management pieces of it, you can look into the Autonomous Cloud Platform. We will have another webinar in the future more specifically focused around the Autonomous Cloud Platform. So if you want to attend that, then that may be useful to you. But that covers both IaaS and PaaS services. So stuff like web apps, SQL PaaS databases, logic apps, etc. They fall into kind of that wider PaaS services. If you'd like us to take some of the third line effort from yourselves, then we can also help with the wider Autonomous Cloud service. So this comes in a couple of different service tiers, advanced and ultimate. I won't delve too much into what they are specifically, because once again, we'll probably do another webinar focused on those kind of pieces, and that will probably give you a little bit more information on that. But at a very high level, it's designed to be a third line support environment leveraging the Autonomous Cloud Platform. So it takes a lot of the administrative effort away from you, but also allows you to have that kind of backup of a third line support engineer. If you need the help because something has gone wrong, there is someone there to try and help you fix it. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what that kind of wider portfolio looks like. We're trying to very much give you options on how you want to enter into this. We're not going to force you down one route, and it's very much what suits your business best. And one of the things that we are very keen on and would be very interested in as part of this as well is what kind of things do you wish the platform had? We're very open to feedback, so we want to try and build what customers would like to see. So any feedback that you have in terms of the roadmap of stuff you'd like to see as part of it, we're more than willing to listen, and we want to make sure that's built out. So to give you an example, we've very much changed the roadmap over the last probably 9 months from focusing on things that we thought were probably going to be more pertinent to listening to customer feedback and actually bringing in some things that we hadn't even considered. So for some of the platform and autonomous cloud service, we're looking at now doing a level of kind of software management as well. So how we do some kind of basic integration into SQL and Active Directory, etc. So we're looking at how we can change that going forward, and we want to build it out with customers. Is we know that this is only ever going to be a success if you as customers and clients want to be able to use it, want to be able to engage with us and feel comfortable with us helping you. So yeah, I hope that kind of gives you a pretty good view of roughly what the Autonomous Cloud Essentials platform is. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, because one of the things that from when I've talked through this with customers is there's quite often a lot of questions that come out of this. So feel free to kind of quiz me, ask me questions. I will do my best to answer everything possible. But as I said, if there's anything that we need to take offline, more than happy to do that. And we'll provide any information out to you, because you may have a specific question to do with your environment or whatever. And then we can also kind of further engage through your account team or your Microsoft account manager if you so wish. So just looking over at the questions, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to also get your questions in as well. So we have a question here. How much does the Microsoft Business Standard cost? If you're referring to the Autonomous Cloud Essentials platform, that is included with the CSP agreement, so it doesn't cost anything from that side. If you're talking about what is the average spend in Azure, that very much depends from customer to customer. I mean, we have customers who are spending hundreds of pounds a month in Azure to customers who are spending tens of thousands of pounds a month in Azure. So it's, unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that question from the kind of Azure side. But from the Autonomous Cloud Essentials side, it is effectively included as part of the CSP agreement, so it doesn't affect from that side. Okay, so another one. So one of the I stated not going to require. So for the upgrades that were mentioned as part of the slides, so that's where we're getting into the additional level. So if you want some of the additional functionality beyond what I've kind of talked about today, so you wanted, let's say, some of the more advanced documentation features or advanced optimization pieces, stuff like automatable backups, etc., then you're looking into either the Autonomous Cloud platform. So that is the software only place. So you guys as customers and clients want to still manage it and you feel that you have capability third line, then you can consume it just as a software piece. That will provide kind of a level up though, because that's covering PaaS services, covers up a load of backup pieces, has a much wider range of services. So I think we're up to, I want to say it's about 30 Azure services covered right now. So from that side, that's quite extensive, but that is a paid for service as part of it. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. If not, then feel free to go and post again, and I'll try and answer it, answer what you're expecting. Cool. I'll review the slides and come back to you. Yeah, that's not a problem. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure my email will be included as part of this, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions, and I'll certainly come back to you and answer any questions that you do have. We have a question, what happens if you're not a CSP customer? So this is quite an interesting one. So there's a couple of different scenarios here. Either you can look at moving towards a CSP agreement. So for a lot of customers, Microsoft is encouraging a move towards a CSP agreement. So from that side, Microsoft are kind of slightly twisting your arm a little bit. But there is equally, if you want to stay on, it might be an EA agreement or it might be an SCE agreement, whatever other agreement you may have, you would probably be looking more towards the platform side at that point. Autonomous Cloud Essentials is very much focused around trying to help CSP customers with some of the kind of fundamental levels of what we're trying to achieve with the Azure platform. And for SE and EA generally, a lot of those customers are consuming a lot more PaaS services, etc. So we've made the decision that that's going to be kind of where those pieces are focused. So another one, is there a minimum term? So as part of this, there is no minimum term. So you can consume this for as long or as short as you wish. Obviously, there is, once it's installed, obviously, if you're going to leave, then as part of this, as part of the kind of agreement that gets put in place, is this the Autonomous Cloud Platform is something that you can only leverage when you are a customer of Ultima's. So that does mean that if you do wish to move your agreement to another provider, which you're more than entitled to do, it would require us removing the Autonomous Cloud services from your environment. Basically, this is one of the I hate the term, but value-added services that Ultima provide. So from that side, it would be very much, we would have to remove it from the environment. That doesn't impact anything you're doing, so it doesn't impact any of the services you've got, but it will just be that obviously the dashboards, etc., will disappear. The documentation wouldn't be something that you have, etc. And another kind of follow-on piece to that, when what we're trying to do as part of this is we're trying to make the onboarding as simple as possible. So effectively, there is only one piece of kind of manual intervention that we do as part of the onboarding, which is effectively a link between our two directories, so two AD directories, to make sure that effectively we're giving out to the right people as part of this. So there's nothing too kind of onerous from that side. We are trying to keep this as simple as we reasonably can. As you can imagine, some of this stuff is not necessarily massively easy. So we're just trying to make sure that we can do this as best possible and as simple as possible for you. Yeah, I think that's it in terms of questions, unless anyone else has any more questions. Let's give you a couple of minutes to type, because I appreciate it can be a little bit slower to type than you sometimes plan. I think that's it, in which case I will say thank you very much for watching. I do very much appreciate your time, and I will now head off and I'll give you back some of your day. Thank you very much.